Dzień dobry. Zaczynamy trzeci dzień Film Springu. Przed tym, nim przedstawię naszych gości, chciałem Wam powiedzieć, że dzisiaj jest mała zmiana w programie. Mianowicie wykład Krzysia Ptaka, który planowany był o godzinie 3 po południu, zacznie się od projekcji filmów Sąsiady Grzegorza Królkiewicza, który był pokazywany w tym roku na festiwalu w Gdyni i miał bardzo dobre recenzje. I wykład zaraz będzie. Krótką przerwę zrobimy po projekcji. Film jest godzina 32 minuty, czyli zaczniemy wykład 15:40. No ale namawiam to, żeby film zobaczyć, bo będzie Krzysztof się odwoływał do tego filmu w swoim wykładzie, a mam nadzieję, że będzie wykład bardzo, mam nadzieję, jestem pewny, bo znam Krzysztofa i ja z czerwonymi uszami słucham jego opowieści i tego, co robi, jak działa, bo jest właśnie takim przykładem człowieka, który zresztą też powiązany bardzo z firmą Sony, która za chwileczkę będzie miała prezentację, bo przeważnie używa ich kamer i też będzie dzisiaj pokazywał Wam rzecz, która rzeczywiście zadziwia możliwościami technicznymi, ale nie chcę tego uprzedzać. Zapraszam na ten wykład gorąco. A teraz jeszcze raz dziękując bardzo Sony Polska za wspomaganie Film Springu, bo wspomagają nas od samego początku i nawet 3 lata temu Sony zapewnił nam wszystko, łącznie ze stacjami roboczymi i laptopami, także kamerami. Także jest naszym stałym partnerem i bardzo Wam za to dziękujemy. Chciałem przedstawić naszych gości. Pana Marcina Tkaczyka, który jest odpowiedzialny za tą właśnie profesjonalną dział Sony, czyli to, czym my się zajmujemy. Mogę tylko powiedzieć, że pan Marcin to jest wielki przyjaciel filmowców i nieraz wielu z młodych kolegów, waszych kolegów ratował, pomagał, zawsze służy radą, posyła rzeczy, które nagle się nawalają. Drugim takim przyjacielem naszym jest Karol Sulej, przepraszam, który był na początku, musiał wyjechać, ale to, że możemy strumieniować te wykłady online, zawdzięczamy też firmie Sony. Dziękuję bardzo za to, a ustawił to właśnie wszystko Karol Sulej. Jeżeli macie jakiekolwiek problemy techniczne, to jest to wspaniały adres. Naprawdę zna się na tej technologii wspaniale. I na końcu prelegentem dzisiaj będzie Florian Rettisch. My się znamy. Florian pracował ze mną na planie niemieckiego filmu 3D. 3D Vermessung der Welt, mierzenie świata, chyba tak, nie wiem jakie jest tłumaczenie po polsku, angielski tytuł jest Measuring the World. Herzlich willkommen in Polen. Ich hoffe, magst du das hier? Und wir warten auf deinen Antritt. So, alles Gute und wir werden wahrscheinlich viele Fragen danach haben. Zapraszam.
Halo. Dzień dobry. Witam serdecznie. Dziękuję za ciepłe słowa, panie Sławku. Proszę państwa, moje nazwisko Marcin Tkaczyk, tak jak pan Sławek mnie przedstawił. Ja w Sony zajmuję się sprzętem profesjonalnym audio-wideo. W dniu dzisiejszym pokażę kilka slajdów jako taki introduction, jako taki wstęp do naszej prezentacji. To będą slajdy, które będą pokazywały naszą ofertę kamer z dużym przetwornikiem, Large Sensor Cameras. Również powiem kilka słów o kamerze, która mogę ją nazwać wielką nieobecną tutaj, FS7 o naszej nowości, a później Florian poprowadzi część taką bardziej praktyczną, trochę PowerPointa. Pokażemy Państwu też kilka, myślę, ciekawych ujęć zrobionych, przygotowanych specjalnie na tą prezentację, ale również nieprzygotowanych w ogóle właśnie z kamery f55. Zanim zacznę, to chciałbym też powiedzieć, co macie do dyspozycji tutaj, jeśli chodzi o kamery Sony. kamery, które są dostępne dla Was podczas tegorocznych plenerów. To jest bardziej reporterska kamera PXWX-180, to jest nowy model z 3 przetwornikami. To jest model, który jest pierwszą kamerą multikodekową, czyli zapisującą w 4 formatach. Zazwyczaj było tak, że kamery były podzielone na różnego rodzaju grupy, te zapisywały w takim systemie kompresji, te w takim. To jest pierwsza z rodziny kamer multikodekowych. Zapisuje na niedrogich kartach XQD i ma na stałe zamontowany obiektyw, to jest Sony G-Lens. Kolejna kamera, którą zapewne większość z Was już zna, to jest Nex FS700. My żeśmy go tutaj dostarczyli w najbogatszej opcji, czyli to jest kamera, którą możecie się posługiwać razem z rekorderem rawowym, pisać 4K na zewnętrznym rekorderze, tak jak na tym slajdzie widać. Kamera już jest z przetwornikiem pełnoklatkowym, Super 35 z wymiennym obiektywem. Takie inne punkty, które warto podkreślić, to jest to, że to jest chyba najtańsza w tej chwili na rynku opcja do high speedu, bo kamera może zapisywać na wbudowanej pamięci wewnętrznej do 240 klatek na sekundę z pełną rozdzielczością HD. Zapisuje na tanich nośnikach SD lub memory stick. Jest też możliwość podłączenia tego rekordera, który widzicie na slajdzie. To jest rekorder rawowy i wtedy zapis realizowany jest na kartach AXS. No i główne produkty, które prezentujemy tutaj również w najbogatszej opcji, jaką udało nam się przygotować i dostarczyć na plenery, to jest set F5, kamery również z przetwornikiem Super 35. Tutaj mamy już system PL, czyli obiektywy filmowe, no i zapis na wbudowanym rekorderze z kodekiem XDKMX, XAVC, to jest nowy system kompresji, ale również możliwość zapisu RAW-ów bezkompresyjnych na tym samym rekorderze do FS700, tylko w przypadku F5 ten rekorder jest doczepiany bezpośrednio do kamery. Ta kamera również umożliwia zapis high-speedowy do 180 klatek na sekundę. Zapis na nośnikach wewnętrznych to są karty SXS doskonale znane z całej linii kamer klasy EX. No i zewnętrzny rekorder AXS-R5 zapisujący na kartach AXS. Model wyżej, czyli F55, jest sporo różnic między F5 a F55. Nie będę tutaj się nad tymi różnicami może szczegółowo rozwodził. Warto wspomnieć, że ta kamera wyposażona jest w funkcję Global Shutter, czyli funkcja, która między innymi eliminuje efekt tak zwanego rolling shuttera czy też flashbandu. Natomiast wielką nieobecną jest kamera PXW-FS7. Jest to kamera, którą pierwszy raz pokazaliśmy na początku września w Amsterdamie podczas targów IBC o godzinie 9 w piątek. Stoisko Sony było całkowicie zasłonięte czarnymi kurtynami. Była ogólnoświatowa premiera tej kamery, konferencja prasowa. Od 10 otworzyliśmy stoisko i wtedy miał miejsce właśnie pierwszy pokaz tej kamery dla otwartej publiczności. Niestety nie udało mi się, chociaż mocno się starałem, ściągnąć tutaj egzemplarza tej kamery. Trwają jeszcze jakby prace, ostateczne prace, które mają na celu zrobienie finalnego produktu. Powiem kilka słów na temat tej kamery, a później pokażemy Państwu showreel, czyli pierwszy film, który został nakręcony właśnie tą kamerą. Ten slajd pokazuje cały line-up naszych kamer, które są kamerami z dużym przetwornikiem. Są to urządzenia z klasy od między 1000 a 4000 euro i tutaj warto wspomnieć nowy, może nie kamerę, ale doskonały aparat, który ma możliwość realizowania zdjęć filmowych w niemalże kompletnej ciemności z ISO do 400 000. To jest aparat Alpha 7S pełnoklatkowy. Oprócz tego mamy kamerę Nex EA50, to jest kamera z przetwornikiem APS-C. Mamy FS-setkę, najtańsza kamera z pełną klatką filmową Super 35, no i nowa kamera z jednocalowym przetwornikiem PXW70. Jeśli chodzi o segment wyżej, to mamy Nexa FS700, który jest tutaj do Państwa dyspozycji. no i PXW FS7, kamera, która właśnie w tej chwili wchodzi, no i najwyższa półka, czyli BMW F5, F55 oraz kamera F65. Teraz kilka słów na temat FS7. Otóż ta kamera jest kamerą, która ma być przede wszystkim kamerą handy, czyli wygodną w pracy, i my, projektując tą kamerę, zastanawialiśmy się, co jest najbardziej pożądane, żeby zrobić tanią, niedrogą i funkcjonalną kamerę filmową. No i na pewno przetwornik musi być Super 35, jako że jest to standard filmowy, 4K, no bo teraz w zasadzie już w tą stronę cały rynek zmierza. Jeżeli to ma być kamera dostępna do niskobudżetowych produkcji, no to musi być możliwość instalowania tanich obiektywów, tanich nośników oraz kodek, który zapewnia, gwarantuje doskonałą jakość obrazu, i tutaj poszliśmy w stronę 8-bitowego kodeka 422, ale również funkcja high speed, slow and quick motion. Natomiast co jeszcze więcej, być może nawet funkcjonalność czy rzecz jeszcze bardziej istotna, a mianowicie design. I właśnie konstruktorzy tej kamery w zasadzie, projektując ją, wyszli od designu, czyli od tego, że kamera ma być wygodna, ergonomiczna i w sposób prosty i łatwy dostępna w obsłudze. I tak wygląda w praktyce ta kamera. To jest kamera, która jest pokazana w standardowym wyposażeniu, czyli wszystko, co Państwo widzą, włącznie z tym ruchomym gripem, który zamontowany jest na tej dźwigni, jest w zestawie razem z kamerą. Jest to bardzo innowacyjny wygląd, jeśli chodzi o nasze rozwiązania. Jeszcze tego typu kamery w ofercie Sony nie było. No, ale przede wszystkim po to, żeby można było łatwo i w sposób przyjazny dla użytkownika pracować z tą kamerą w różnego rodzaju zastosowaniach, chociażby tak jak widzą Państwo tutaj na tych zdjęciach. Rozdzielczość 4K, no to jest to, w którą stronę rynek zmierza, szczególnie jeśli chodzi o aplikacje filmowe. Przetwornik 4K, czułość 2000, czyli taka sama jak w przypadku F5, 14 stopni przysłony, poziom sygnał szum 57 oraz możliwość zapisu high speedu w przypadku zapisu na zewnętrznym rekorderze do 240 klatek na sekundę, zapis 2K RAW-owy. No i tani system obiektywowy, system montażu typu E, czyli znany Państwu chociażby ze wszystkich półprofesjonalnych aparatów fotograficznych klasy NEX, ale również nowych ALF, cichy autofokus, przepraszam, cichy fokus oraz automatyczna przysłona. Jeśli chodzi o kodek, to zastosowaliśmy tutaj również tą wielorakość kompresji, czyli można zapisywać w MPEG-u drugim, czyli tak samo jak w systemie XD-Cam EX, jak na kamerach EX1, EX3, ale również nowy kodek XAVC, gdzie kompresję można ustawiać od 50 do 800 megabitów na sekundę, w zależności od tego, jak realizowany jest zapis, czy w 2K, czy w 4K i jaki jest ustawiona jakość obrazu. No i oczywiście zewnętrzny rekorder, również możliwość zapisu w RAW-ach, ale to jeszcze nie wszystko, bo od pierwszego kwartału przyszłego roku będzie również możliwość upgrade'owania tej kamery i zapisu w Polskich ProResach. Tak wygląda kamera z lewej strony, bez obiektywu. Tak wygląda z tyłu. Zasilana jest tymi samymi akumulatorami, które były stosowane w kamerach klasy EX. Tak wygląda prawa strona. Tak wygląda góra. No i tak mamy kompletny setup kamery razem z takim zewnętrznym adapterem z tyłu, który umożliwia podłączenie rekordera RAW-owego, jak i również aktywuje kilka innych funkcji. Proszę Państwa, co więcej, kamera dostępna będzie w Europie w październiku. Na dzień dzisiejszy pierwsze dostawy do Polski zapowiedziane są na 43 tydzień, czyli to jest, o ile dobrze pamiętam, przedostatni tydzień października. Ja bym teraz zaprosił Państwa do obejrzenia 3-4 minutowego klipu. To jest pierwszy klip, który został przygotowany w Japonii i skręcony tą kamerą. Ten klip w większości przypadków ten klip jest nagrany w 4K, w większości przypadków z 60p, zresztą opis Państwo zobaczą na ekranie. Także ja bardzo dziękuję i po tym filmie oddaję głos Florianowi.
Unfortunately, my Polish is not existing, so I apologize. My presentation will be done in English. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for having us here. My name is Florian Rettich. I'm from Munich, and at Sony there is a training program which is run by people out there in the market, and they call it Independent Certified Expert. And for some reasons I had the drink with the right people on the right bar at the very right moment. So at some point I become a Sony Independent Certified Expert. And I'm doing that now for a couple of years, mostly focusing on the F-series cameras. And as you might know, there is already a bit of a tradition at Sony with the film-style cameras. I started with the F900, F23, F35, F65, and now F5, 55, and let's see what's coming up next. I also train professional monitors, but that's a different story. So my background is first assistant cameraman, and then mainly focusing on production supervising in terms of production technology, finding the right tools for the project, establishing workflow, and yeah, support the cameraman as far as I can. So today, my intention is not to give you even more slide. I would like to train you a little bit, because you have cameras here and you have a couple of days the opportunity to work with the camera. You have a 55, you have 5. Martin already showed you what cameras are available, and I would like to show you a few things to understand the camera, because Sony cameras in the past, oh, the screen disappears. Sony cameras in the past didn't have the name of being very intuitive, and that changed a lot. It's very easy to become and to operate a Sony camera. Let me quickly get back my slides. This keeps turning off itself, I'm sorry. Nope. Here we go. Okay, sorry for that. So what I would like to cover for you is just a few things. Mostly the camera lineup you already saw, and I don't want to bore you with it. At Sony there's one big number, it's the 4K number. There are different flavors of 4K, so we might have a look at that if you're interested. But I want to focus on how easy it is to get a camera that you get here from the shop ready to use. And there's a film style approach to it. It's called Cine EI, and I'm going to introduce it to you. How do you expose it? If you learn to know how to expose film, you can easily adopt to that electronic camera, because first time since a couple of years you can treat these cameras a bit like a film stock. Then we have F series, 2 clips. One is a bit older. It's a little short movie from the UK, shot with a 55. And the second one is a high-speed reel, because these cameras can shoot up to 240 frames high speed in a 2K mode. And if you're interested, I can show you that as well, because high speed is a very emotional way of telling stories as well. And I call it Shot on Sony. We have the luck that we can screen some graded and non-graded clips from a famous Polish movie, and I will introduce that after my little presentation. So, if you have questions, because I speak too fast or there are too many very nerdy items here on the screen, raise your hand and ask a question. It's your workshop, it's not mine, so feel free to ask questions anytime, please. So there's a big number, it's the 4K number, and all of these F cameras, F65, F55, FS7, and there's even a smaller one, the Z100, all of them are now able to capture at 4K resolution. We will focus on the F series for the moment, because you have them here and now available. And the F5 is a bit of a lower entry into that professional camera market. It was designed mainly as a 2K and HD camcorder using a super 35mm sensor, so it gives you the look and feel as a large format 35mm camera at a reduced price and some reduced capabilities, but generally you can do a lot. You have a variety of recording options. This, because I don't want to get into nerd details, we can talk about later if you're interested in details. You can record internally onto the existing S cards up to 180 frames per second. And with a RAW recorder, which is optional, you can also go up to 240 frames even with this camera. The F55 can everything what the F5 can do. On top, it allows you internal 4K recording, which is also an update option since a couple of days for the F5. And it has a different sensor. So it looks a very minor difference, but actually there's a physical difference on the design of the sensor between the two cameras. And the reason for that is we all know that especially still photography cameras that are not designed for motion picture in the first place, they used to suffer from heavy rolling shutter artifacts. Most of the modern design cameras also use rolling shutter sensors. Also Sony uses it. But for some situations, a rolling shutter might be a problem. I might show you an example in one slide about rolling shutter, just to summarize that the F65 is still available, and it uses an even higher resolution sensor, also Super 35 size. We don't have it here, so I want to make it quick. So the differences between the F5 and the 55, one of the biggest is the sensor, as I mentioned. So F5 has a rolling shutter. It's not like super bad. It's state of the art in rolling shutter technology. Also other competitive companies like Arri, like Canon, they use rolling shutter to read out their sensor. There's nothing really completely bad with it. But if you do things like really fast motion or gunfire, flashes, you immediately see if you have a rolling shutter camera or not. And with the F55, they eliminate it with a technology called frame image scan. Probably most of you will call it a global shutter. And if you're interested, I can show you some examples in the differences. And also, this technology is the reason why the sensitivity is slightly different between the two cameras. So actually, the rolling shutter gives you a bit better sensitivity because there's one little transistor less on the sensor. But I think 1250 ISO as a starting point is not too bad. So this is a still I took with my cell phone camera out of a train's window. So of course this tree is not grown like that. It happens to be a readout issue. And also that building is not designed like that. I compared F5 and F55. So I took a flash. It's hard to see, so I do it again and freeze at that part. So only the top part is illuminated if I flash into a rolling shutter camera. If I take an F55 or a global shutter camera, if I look at the still frame, it's everything evenly lit. So just an example that there is a difference. You might consider it as a minor difference. Okay, I'm good with it. But there are situations where it can be really helpful. There used to be also alternative methods to see it, like spinning wheels. We tested it a couple of years ago with CCD cameras. So white lines on a circle, which is rotating, appear as white lines with a global shutter camera. But don't look at that. Could be any camera. But a heavy rolling shutter, the lines get bent. So if you shoot with helicopters, for example, your helicopter rotor will look like this. Okay, this is some explanations on the rolling shutter and the global shutter. Looking at the F65, it actually also has a rolling shutter, but on the F65 they built in a mechanical blade, like in the film cameras with a reflex viewfinder, but they have a little blade to cover the sensor during readout to avoid the rolling shutter. Because when they developed the F65, the frame transfer technology, the frame image scan technology was not available. So if you have questions about all these numbers, come back later. it's gonna get too boring if I go into it now. One key feature I should mention, and then I'm done, I think, with most of that stuff. If you have an F5 or F55, you can make it a really compact setup. So if you do documentary style, or if you have a crane shot, an underwater housing, everything is very modular and can come down to a very small piece of equipment. And the advantage of it is, if you want to make it small, you can reduce it. And if you want to enhance, let's say, the quality, for example, with a raw recording, you simply attach it to the camera. And it's not, there's no single cable used. It's a multi-pin connector, it's easy to operate, and it becomes a part of the camera. And it's a bidirectional communication. So if you ever have worked with external recorders, usually you have the trouble, you're lucky if you have a communication to the recorder, but there's never a feedback. So you're never really sure if the recorder rolls. It's not a problem here. And if you shoot documentary or in extreme places in this world, and we have done it, Slavik, and we went to the jungle. I went to Montreal at minus 29 degrees this January. It happens in our industry. There's another issue, and it's power. Most of the modern cameras are about 80 to 110 watts. And that's a hell of a lot of batteries you carry with you usually. If you use the onboard recording, a ready-to-shoot setup is about 30 watts. That includes the viewfinder. So 30 watts, that's back in the old digibeta days if you used ever these cameras. So you can have, with a 70 watt-hour battery like this one, you can have the camera run for hours, which might be another advantage. Even if you have the raw recorder, we are below 55 watts, which is still very low power consumption. So feel free to play with it. I mentioned for you here, it's more important, how can I use the camera easily? And you don't have too much time, so you have to get up and ready to shoot pretty fast. It's very easy, I think, and I hope I can show it to you. You have to configure a couple of things. We can do it here right now. It's called base setting, and in the base setting there are two shooting modes. It's the cine mode or the custom mode. It looks like that. If you set it to the Cine EI mode, and Cine EI stands for exposure index, the camera turns basically into film style operation, and the side panel will indicate the native sensitivity to you, so you know how to rate the camera immediately. The second setup would be your main operation. So let's say if you want to do a 4K onboard recording, or you want to do raw recording, or you want to do HD in 444, you have to select your main operation here. It's pretty easy. It's just a general kind of routing you have to do once. So let's say, assume you want to record 4K on board. You go to YPBPR because the internal recording allows 4K in YPBPR. And then choose your color space and gamma curve. This looks very weird. What I would like to point out is there is a logarithmic curve, and the logarithmic curves on the Sony gives you all the dynamic range of the camera. And the way they work is that you have a very good amount of code values that you store onto your card per stop. It's not a technical thing, it's like on a film emulsion. On a film emulsion, there's a certain area of the film emulsion where you have a more or less linear representation of grayscales, I would say, per stop. And basically that's what the logarithmic curves gives you. And if you compare and this is not an accident. There's also the Arri curve, and most of the DPs have shot with the Arri curve. The number 3 Sony curve is very similar to the Arri curve, and this is also important because in the color grading, most of the colorists are used with a similar curve, which is actually pretty close to the Signon curve, and the Signon curve was the film logarithmic curve. So if you take your footage later into your color grading, the colorists will feel comfortable with it. The S-Log2, which was the first option, it still works, it still gives you the dynamic range, but some of the colorists didn't like it because it was slightly different in the behavior on the grading, but this is very subjective. So basically, of course, you have to do one decision, how do you want to record? If you want to have the best quality, choose probably S-Gamut3 and S-Log3, which is the most recent version, but version 2 is also not bad. And then, this is only important if you want to shoot more than 60 frames. The imager scan mode. If you choose to shoot 24 most of the time, for example for your cinema project, you don't have to change anything. Everything is here on normal. You can do high speed up to 60 frames in 4K resolution. You don't have to change anything. Only if you want to go to the 240 frames, for example, the imager then will swap into the 2K mode. And there are two 2K modes. One is giving you the same dimension of the same field of view, just with a reduced resolution. So let's say your 32mm lens will stay at 32mm lens even though you're going to shoot at 240 frames. Or, and that's the crop version, if you want to use lenses, it's called 2K center crop. If you want to use super 16mm lenses for some reasons, you can have 2K in the center of the big sensor, basically like super 16 cut out in a 35mm frame, and then you would choose another option. So for you, usually it's always normal, except you want to do high speed, then you go 2K full, and only if you want to use lenses that don't cover the whole sensor, like for example super 16mm lenses, then you change that. And then you're almost done. You choose your project frame rate. Usually for cinema it's 24, for TV it's 25. It can go up to 50 or 60 as a project frame rate, which is kind of interesting for the future because we are already discussing higher frame rates, if you like it or not. And of course, what comes onto the card, that's another decision, but it's a one-click decision. In my example so far, I've chosen 4K onboard recording, and that's XAVC. And you can see in a minute if you want. It's not complicated to make all these adjustments. On the operational side, of course, like on every camera, you have shutter speed, white balance. How do you want to use your video outs? Do you want to have a correction for the director's monitor, or do you want to see a logarithmic image there? It's an average setup. If you record audio, of course, that needs to be configured, but then the lookup tables section I can show you quickly, because you can have independent outputs. That's already in there. You just pick what you need to be able to have, let's say, a clean output to see a logarithmic full dynamic range image, and a corrected output with a nice looking image for the director. Also on the viewfinder, which is an independent channel, you can choose if you want to have the lookup table yes or no, and then you're ready to shoot. I can maybe repeat it. I try to repeat the question. I think you were asking for the dual recording. That's the green mic.
Okay, I would like to know if you speak about the possibility of dual recording, because I'm interested in this, the option of burning the LUT, the 3D LUT to the onboard card, simultaneously to the raw recorder in the back.
Yeah. So I go back one slide or two, that one. As you can see, the hardware design allows you to have 3 different outputs plus the raw. So it's actually one image coming in, and you have a variety of 4 options. If you do the raw recording, you always record the sensor raw data, so there's no adjustment necessary. Everything will be recorded, plus the metadata you set, like white balance stuff. If you want to have a burn-in with lookup table, let's say HD version of what you do for offline editorial, you can select the monitor LUT on the main out, and the main out is the same pipeline that goes to the internal recording. So yes, you can do a raw recording and internal recording, let's say in HD with a burn-in LUT.
Okay, but this is then, I would burn like a standard to setting to the card. What I would like, if you have the time for it, what I'd like to know is the option of creating an own 3D LUT, like a preset of my color correction, and I already burn it directly during the shooting to the card. It's
the same setting. You turn on MLUT, but by choosing, let me show you maybe that one, in the section Monitor LUT, which is also available on the side display. You don't even necessarily have to go inside the menu. You can select it from the side panel. There are sections. One section is called LUT, and it gives you 4 predefined LUTs. That's basically what, if you don't have your own LUT, you pick one of these. For example, most of it is for 709 AK video use, and type A means it looks like more a camera starting with an A. And if there's another section, it's called 3D LUT. And the 3D LUT, you can create your own 33 by 33 fully blown 3D LUT, for example in DaVinci Resolve, which is quite popular, but also in the free RAW viewer from Sony. And you export it to an SD card. Like that. And then you go to the menu and you import that LUT to the camera, and it can be displayed and recorded, whatever you choose, as you want. Yes, you can do that. There's only one difference. If you use multiple lookup tables, like 6, you have to take care not
to name them correctly.
To name them and track them. But except that, it's possible. No extra hardware is needed.
So to do it in the inside of the RAW viewer, you just get in some stuff you shoot, you change what you want to change.
Exactly.
Done.
You have to, of course, match, let's say, your logarithmic curve to start with. Let's say if you record at S-log3, S-3, you should use footage shot on S-log3, S-3, yeah, because otherwise the LUT will not match. But yes, you can do. You should do it like that, actually.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So you are ready to shoot. On the side panel of the camera, blue mic. Wow, great. On the side panel of the camera, once you've done your settings, it gives you the exposure index. So in that case, F55 native is 1250. So it is written there how much highlight latitude you have if the camera is set to 1250. So right next to it, it's in gray, so you can't change it. It says highlight latitude 6.0 E, and E means exposure values, AKA is a stop. So at 1250 ISO, from your middle gray to sensor clipping, you have 6 stops. So you can use your light meter immediately and see, okay, this is how the camera behaves. If you push the ISO, let's say, by 1 stop to 2500, it's 7 stops highlight latitude, and you can do the math. You have 1 stop less in the shadows now. This is how all digital cameras work, but this camera intuitively gives you the feedback. So if you are used to use a light meter, and your contrast, usually you use your light meter, isn't it? It's a probably helpful tool for you to use the camera. And if you're not sure, you of course can use all the electronic tools in the camera like waveform or whatever to judge your accurate exposure and maybe tweak it a little bit. If you have questions about exposure.
No, not about the exposure. I would like to know, is it possible to switch, for example, you have there an onboard monitor, can I put to the onboard monitor just the waveform, or it's always like a mixed image of the what I see and the waveform?
It's a bit of a limited version of a waveform. The viewfinders can display waveform vector scope, and I think there's a false color. But it's a bit of a limited, it's not like a fully blown waveform as you could have as separate device. There's a nice PDF which is free of charge. You just have to register. It's not a Sony thing, so disclaimer, this is not a Sony thing. It's something, if it's wrong, it's my fault. If you go to hingsberg.com, you can sign up for the Ultimate Exposure Guide for Sony, and actually this book you can apply to most of digital cameras. It's not too big, it's a bit technical if you, of course, it's about technical stuff, but it's a good guide if you want to learn to expose digital cameras, especially the Sony cameras, right? There is also, if you're in the field, an option control the camera or just see what's going on with a Wi-Fi connection. I mean, it's only as good as Wi-Fi can be, but even on a smartphone, let me see if it works. There's a small control display and remote feature available. Sometimes you don't have the tools on your hand, but you're stuck in a corner, you have to go on jib or on a crane, and you just want to see if the camera is rolling, or you just want to start and stop it, or you can do all kind of things, even go to the menu. You don't need to have an application for it. It's platform independent. The camera can create a little Wi-Fi network. You log in, so not everyone can log in. There's a username and a protected Wi-Fi, but except that, you can, for example, change the exposure index. From here I changed it to 5000, and it's 5000. So they are nice gadgets, not really important things, but sometimes it's really helpful to have a tool like that. Yes, if you want, we can show you the menu of the camera to see how it works. Yeah, we can do it later. Yeah, let's shift it a little bit. Yeah, I agree. So are there more questions then? Otherwise, I would like to show you the two reels for, oh, here you see. That's, we switched to 5000 ISO just by the remote, and I can go back to 1250. So it's not a fake. Yeah, so I would like to show you two little videos because movie making is not about the camera, it's about the images. The first one is a bit an older one. Some of you might have seen it, but it's really hard to get good content, which we are allowed to show. First is a short movie shot in the UK. Steve Lawrence is the DP. It was the first attempt of Sony to create some footage with the F55 prototype these days. What is important on that is he had his own look in his mind. If you like it or not, it's your decision. But since we have logarithmic capture and raw capture, you're not stuck to a thing called the Sony look. You can create your look with any camera nowadays. And maybe you have a look at this clip first, and then we have a look at the second one with high speed afterwards. There should be sound. Oh yeah. probably one example for someone using the camera that has shot a lot of features for television before. It's from my point of view, it's not an example for extreme conditions in terms of maybe a scenic project in the cinema. The next thing is it was the intention to show how good the 2K holds up even in the 4K projection. We unfortunately don't have that here. It was shot on the F55 at 240 frames per second to the RAW recorder, and we have it here as a full HD projection, so if you want, take a look at that. And afterwards we have some special footage from a Polish movie. So let's have a look at the high-speed reel, please. Yes, and if we can quickly switch back to the PowerPoint, I have one introduction slide. I'm really happy that we managed to get support from a local DOP, and I would like to welcome Krzysztof Ptak, and I excuse my bad Polish pronunciation. I can't even pronounce the title of the movie properly. That's why I asked for support and put it on the slide, which disappeared again, of course, which takes a second. Sorry. So how I gonna give you a microphone? The thing is, we are really lucky to have the DOP, Christoph, here, as well as 2 examples he provided to us from his movie, which has not been released yet. And what we'd like to show you is versions of the movie that are non-corrected and then color corrected. So you can see maybe how far you can go, and I would like to ask Christoph to maybe speak about his intention when we show the 2 clips, especially on the way of exposing or the way of the color correction was used on that example. So let's have a look at the first example, ungraded first, and maybe we can hand over the microphone to Christoph if he wants to give us a comment, because on some of the footage there's no sound with it. You want to comment? We have another one here. A small announcement from
Hello.
Slavic. Yeah.
So, for all of you who are interested to watch or to hear lecture of Krzysztof Tak, we are starting earlier. So it starts 2 o'clock p.m. We watch first his movie and later on his lecture, just before we finish, and of course, please continue.
Yeah. So the movie will be screened here at Film Spring Open. For so that's exactly, yeah. So let's have a look at it. Thanks for supporting us, Christoph.
To jest ujęcie bez korekcji RAW. Oczywiście to nie jest wyświetlane z plika RAW, bo notebook by nie dał rady wyświetlić w czasie rzeczywistym. To jest ProRes 422, ale bez korekcji. A to już jest ujęcie po korekcji. Now it was only natural light, without any my light.
So this is uncorrected logarithmic again.
ujęcia są właśnie z tego filmu Sąsiady, który będziemy pokazywać o 14, także możemy, tak myślę, że będzie większy sens porozmawiać w ogóle po projekcji całego filmu, bo to są ujęcia wyrwane z kontekstu. Ale akurat to, co teraz widzimy, dlatego wam pokazałem akurat ten przykład, bo całe życie marzyłem, żeby zrobić w filmie tak zwane czarne światło, no i w tej krótkiej sekwencji udało mi się to zrobić. Zresztą zobaczycie, bo poprzednio oglądaliście RAW bez korekcji, bez efektów, a tu będzie kilka ujęć z czarnym światłem, że tak powiem.
Krzysztof invite all of you for his lecture, because we are watching 2 o'clock the entire movie. But in short, he would like to say that his dream all his life was to make a black light. So before what you watch, you got the uncorrected RAW screening, and now it's corrected. But once again, you know, all of this in detail, he would talk later on after the screening of the movie 2 o'clock. Invite all of you for his lecture.
Yeah, I think we can have some questions, but we have a lot of questions for Christoph also available this afternoon.
And I would suggest, you know, if for some of you more interested, you know, you can explain a few things about the menu and
Yes.
how to work. So,
Yeah, so we can do that.
so you are very much welcome to join Florian on the stage and
Yes.
talk a little bit if you have some specific question about any issues connected to the menu of the camera and anything.
I will be
You'd like
here
to know.
all day. I will be here all day.
Or we can.
Can you go back to
Okay. Anyway, we can go outside as well. You know, and we can do it. We can do it practical way. You know, in front of the house. So you decide what you like to do. Martin, you can organize it because you are a good organizer. So.
I just pop up to, because I really, like I said already, I'm interested in this 3D LUT and so on and so on and so on. And is there something like an idea at the company of Sony that there is a possibility of, for example, changing something like 3D LUT or whatever that what affects the image, that I can do it at live, like connecting a laptop, air yacht, like a network cable, and then I redo, like in the old times that I used filters and I decide them and I burn them to the material by using them on set. So is there a possibility of adding something live what I changed by a laptop to the chip?
It is indeed the case. There are two options. At the F65 you can actually grade inside the camera using color decision list. You can hook up a grading panel. But maybe more convenient is the way that the raw viewer allows you to hook up a little LUT box called HD Link, for example, and then you have the logarithmic SDI live out of the camera going to that box, and you can adjust your corrections on the live feed, display it on a monitor, and then save that as a lookup table. There's also commercial tools for that. For example, the software called LiveGrade, which uses a similar technology, but has a bit wider choices of LUT boxes to use. But the fastest way would be to have the live logarithmic video feed going to that box. You can do your adjustments with proper tools, let's say on a computer, and then export it later on. It's possible.
But it is still the way of this LUT boxes and so on, because I was asking for, like you mentioned before, the camera is easy to use, it's tiny, it's not so heavy, so to go on the field, having a tiny laptop with me, like a MacBook Air or whatever, do some changes and it's already in the camera. This would be for me very interesting. For example, this week we will shoot with the 55, and because we don't have so much, the end result goes just for somehow HD, it's not for the screen, it's for presentation, for convincing producers and so on. So we go down to 2K to maximize our saving and not having such amount of data for such a tiny project or somehow. So we would, of course, I would be interested in having the most possible way to adjust what I achieve in the quickest and somehow tiny field way.
Yeah, we can try that, but there are a lot of possibilities for that. Yeah, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Right, so ask questions, come up here. That's actually a friend of mine who shot a documentary in the Himalaya with that camera. So he still seems to be kind of happy on that picture, even at 4,000 meters of height. So you can use it in different applications. And if you want, we can have a look at the menu now of the camera. I would like to thank for your time so far. And feel free to contact me. I'm here all day, and of course, Marcin will be here for any questions. Maybe we can swap the projection quickly. Can we go to the camera, please? Can you switch to the camera, please, on the screen? Come here. What's also very interesting is this is a lens using a servo, but there's no cable. It is there are pins in the lens mount to give power to the servo, so you don't have to have a separate lens connector cable. So this is a long focal length, but there's also short. So if you have documentary style, these 100 lenses become more popular. There's more space here. Yeah.
And when the Sony F7 will be released on the European market?
I think end of the year. FS7 deliveries.
Would